Reminder, sorry, we've had a meeting this morning, but just for this meeting, the meeting is being live streamed. Just to double check your phones that are still on silent after the luncheon break. I'd like to ask Councillor Kiriopa if you could open our meeting with a karakia, please.
Tūtawa mai runga, tūtawa mai raro, tūtawa mai roto, tūtawa mai waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāwaki e.
Kia ora, Councillor Kiriopa, for the opening karakia. So are there any apologies for this meeting? No, we've got a full house today. Any declarations of interest? No, there don't appear to be any. Any urgent items not on the agenda? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just going back to the previous council meeting we had when I raised this issue with regards to an invitation to Darren Toy. I understand that that was going to be progressed. Have we had any update on that?
At this stage, the Mayor and I are meeting Darren Toy next week, where we will issue that invitation to him, and it is likely that he will attend the Community and District Development Committee, which is the right committee in terms of housing and planning.
Thank you.
Councillors, there are no other urgent items. We'll move now to page 6 of the agenda, which is confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting held on the 31st of January. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the minutes be confirmed as a true and correct record? Thank you, Councillor Kiriopa, seconded by Councillor Barker. Items for amendment? No, there don't appear to be any. Then I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. Now moving on to the staff reports, which is page 13 in your agenda. This is the long-term plan 2024 to 34 supporting information, and we're on part 2 of that. So can I have a mover and a seconder that the long-term plan supporting information part 2 be received? Thank you, Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you, carried. Welcome, Thomas. You'll overview the report with...
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, councillors. This is the first lot of 2 policies we'll be asking you to approve. We'll be approving them in draft, and they'll be loaded onto our website and be supporting information with regards to the future long-term plan consultation. So the 3 policies are quite comprehensive. They haven't had a significant amount of change, but have been reviewed. So the first one being the revenue and financing policy does obviously set out how council funds its activities and where it draws its revenues from. The Treasury policy is one that guides particularly myself and my team, the finance team, with regards to how we manage council's financial affairs, and in particularly its debt. That has been reviewed by PwC and has had some modifications based on their advice. And then the third one, which is the rates for emissions policy, which obviously governs how we apply our emissions, the rules, the criteria, and what we can and can't do. So without going into further detail into the individually, I'm more than happy to answer any specific questions that members may have on the policies. I don't know, Councillor, Madam Chair, if you wanted to work through them individually?
That it might be easier if we take the questions in relation to each of the policies individually, so that if we start perhaps with the revenue and financing policy. So, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification. Under the table borrowing limits, there is a highlighted section, I guess you could say, with an asterisk. It said LGFA net debt total revenue covenant is currently 290% for financial year ending June 2024, declining by 5% each financial year until 280% is reached in financial year ending 2026. Can you explain what that means, please?
I'd love to explain that when we're talking about the financial strategy in the next agenda item, Councillor.
Sorry. So we're on the revenue and financing policy.
No, I didn't have any questions.
So we'll take that question later, Councillor Patterson, when we get to that document. So this is the revenue and financing policy. So this is the document that tells us how council funds each activity. Just give you a minute to check that, because I know you have to go between the agenda and the documents. So, Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I thought I'd start to get the ball rolling. I know how much you love my melodic voice, so thank you, Thomas, for your reports. Apologies if this doesn't quite fit in, but under the any other sources, could I just ask, have we put forward, and it's something I'll be following up with in the LTP down the track, but one of the issues we've brought up is our reliance on rates and then fees and charges. Has there been any thought, or is that up to us, about how we can progress a third, which would be creating some sort of future fund where we have an investment source? Because it seems to me, with all due respect to all the work we've done on the LTP, much of which I support, we haven't really looked at the big picture of solving some of the issues that we say, well, we keep having the same problem around having to put rates up. And one of the refrains I keep hearing is, oh, we just need this one time to be high, and then all the others will be, you know, the problem solved.
Yep. I'll address the question of an investment fund. So councillors will be aware that there are many councils within New Zealand that have investment funds. They're either driven from regional councils with ports, or we're territorial authorities, particularly when the electricity market was disestablished and a lot of the councils picked up those funds. Rotorua was different. Council didn't have that. Instead, I think the Rotorua Energy Charitable Trust was formed, and so for us to now establish a fund of some sort would either require us to sell assets to then reinvest into another purpose. So taking an asset that may be high in value but poor in revenue and disposing of it and investing it into another class of assets that returns income, or alternatively build it up over time with regards to generating larger operating surpluses, cash surpluses, and starting an investment program to build up over time, similar to what I guess the government did back in the 2000s with regards to the superannuation fund. They started smallish and have built it up over time. And so those are probably the only two realistic options available to us.
If I could, Madam Chair, just one of the things I'd like to signal moving forward in the LTP is I hope that that's an option, not that this current council will be able to put in anything in place, but again, the challenges are, we know that we either fall back on rates and use the fees and charges. Otherwise, the only other way is for us to look at another option. So I hope that that is something that we can look at least raising with the community, even if it's not in this council's term, to be able to enact it. But I think we need to start the conversation with the community to start addressing some of these big picture stuff that have been kicked down the road for too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, and also remembering too that this council also has requested commercialisation of certain venues as another option for raising funds as well. Any further questions to Thomas in relation to this? Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, te amanaki. Tēnā koe, Thomas. Just a quick question. So this policy has been put forward for our consideration today. How different is it from the current one, or has there been any changes, as you mentioned before? No,
there's only very minor editorial changes. The sources of revenues, I think with the exception of maybe the development contributions, which we obviously introduced, is very consistent with previous years.
Thank you.
Any further questions on this policy, councillors, before we move on to the next one? No, it looks like everyone's fairly comfortable with parameters of that policy, so we'll move on now to the Treasury policy. Oh, sorry. So I
think this is the one where Councillor Patterson's question. So that relates to table 4.3, the borrowing limits, and the statement underneath with regards to 290%. So historically, the LGFA did have a lower limit, but when COVID arrived, that limit was raised in agreement with the sector and all else, and so it was raised up to 290%. And it was designed to taper off into the future years as councils and the country and the communities moved out of into that post-COVID environment. So that's what that statement refers to. So what it says is that we have our own internal limit of 250%, but we note that our main financer is the local government funding agency, and they will allow us to borrow up to 290%, but bearing in mind that if we were to do that, which we're not, that limit will be declining 5% every year until it reaches back down to 280% by 2026. But because we're operating within our internal limit of 250, that's not an issue for us.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further questions on the Treasury policy? Just give you a minute to get to that paper. Councillor Barker.
Mine's just one of clarity, really around the LGFA and our obligations as guarantors. It says that in 4.7 that we provide guarantees of indebtedness of other local authorities, and that I understand that if we're guaranteeing money to other councils, if something needs to be called back, that we will contribute based on the size of what we owe already to LGFA, and it's prorated across other councils as well. Is the risk for that? I notice on 8.1 that there's a notice of the risk involved with some of this. Do you perceive the risk to be significant? Is there a problem that we need to be aware of with regards to the ability of other councils to meet their debt requirements, and if not, and what impact does that have on this policy, if any?
Yep. So I guess I'll start by giving the rationale for why that is there, to give some context. So when, before the LGFA came on board, councils were predominantly borrowing from banks or having to go to the market themselves with regards to issuing commercial paper. And that had quite a significant cost, and also going to the banks at that time, the margins that the banks would charge us were quite high. And so the LGFA was born. Now, for the LGFA, they go into the international markets and they seek, obviously, interest in people investing into New Zealand councils. And to do that, they have quite a strong credit rating. And that credit rating is based on the guarantees and the participants of the councils that are guarantees. And so that mechanism of co-sharing in that pain should a council default is one of the mechanisms that provides LGFA with such a strong credit rating, which has helped bring the cost of borrowing down to the whole local government sector across New Zealand. And it's now at the point that for most commercial banks, they'll try and actually match what the LGFA does, but that's our preference. So that's the reason that is there. If you were to talk to the credit rating agencies that do come and talk to us and do annual reviews, and we're currently in one at the moment, they've never signalled any concerns around that aspect of it. And one of the main reasons is that while we have that guarantee, each council has to have issued security stock as well, and there are mechanisms around how each of those councils has to pay back that debt. And as a reminder, all our debt is pretty much secured against our revenue, which is predominantly against our rates. And so the first port of call from any borrower, if a council was to default, was to set a rate and charge the community a rate to pay that back. Now, that's no different from how it's always historically been for councils. Now, obviously, that's could be a shock to any community, but we're not aware of any council being in that position to having to do that.
Thank you. Second question, if that's okay. It's actually under 5.7, I think it is. As a guaranteeing local authority, council is required to commit to subscribe to redeemable shares in certain circumstances. Is that what you just alluded to, or is that something different, and what are the circumstances? Oh,
so that's different as well. So effectively, for every $100 we borrow, we leave $2.50 back as debenture stock. So that's effectively shows an investment on our balance sheet. And so that debenture stock is effectively a convertible stock that can convert to equity should the LGFA need more support with regards to maintaining its credit rating and its ability to manage its affairs. So effectively, for every $100 we borrow, we get $97.50. $2.50 converts to debenture stock that has the potential to convert to shareholding if required, and we get a return on that debenture stock. And when the debt is repaid, we get that debenture stock back as well. So we currently have about, I think, $9 million on our balance sheet of debenture stock, which is earning a relatively marginal return, but that again is another mechanism that the LGFA has to strengthen and hold its credit rating, which we all benefit from with the lower cost of borrowing. So the LGFA, as a result of the guarantees from the councils, a little bit from the government as well, and those mechanisms, is able to maintain its AA+ credit rating.
Thank you for your explanation.
Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? No? Okay, we'll move on now to the rates remission policy. So I'll let you change papers in your agenda on Stella. Councillor O'Brien.
Madam Chair, thank you, Thomas. Could I just ask, Thomas, in regards to these significant natural areas, that $5, is that standard, or sorry, is that inflation adjusted, or because it's a part of it's a payment per hectare, it will remain the $5 flat for the foreseeable future?
It's flat, it's not inflation adjusted. I can't quite remember the mechanism of how that $5 was set, but you'll recall, I think there was quite a bit of discussion and comparison of that, comparable to what other councils were doing across the country at that time. But no, it's not inflation adjusted.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, please, is, sorry, I was just looking at the one about schools, and I was just wondering if there's any capacity for us to perhaps be looking at any locations that assist us in civil defence, whether there'd be any room for us to offer a similar sort of subsidy, or sorry, some sort of form of accommodation, so that if those places are providing cover for us during a civil defence emergency, that council as a whole, or the community as a whole, is making some sort of contribution to sort of say thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, obviously the schools are governed by, I can't remember the exact name of the Education Act, and has special provisions. We don't currently within our policy have a mechanism to recognise agreeable facilities that might be used across our community, but if that is something that we do receive feedback on during consultation, then they could be considered. Yep.
Thank you. Any, Councillor Barr?
Actually, my question just follows on from Councillor O'Brien's one about the SNAs, actually. I sent note the minimum size is 20 hectares. Is there any accounting at all for properties that are smaller than that, but still have a significant amount of their property covered with an SNA for any rates rebate? And how did we actually get to the 20 hectares? Thank you.
Unfortunately, the SNA policy is not in my realm of expertise or area, so I only, and my team only administer the remission policy. So I'm not sure JP has familiar knowledge with that, or we might have to refer to the staff members that did the detailed work there.
Through you, Madam Chair, obviously Councillor Barker has raised this questions with us, so we are seeking to get an answer back on how that's determined and what the framework of it is. I think it would be beneficial to all councillors probably if we, once we get those answers compiled, we'll circulate it to all councillors as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, JP. Councillor Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just discount on early payment of rates. The policy doesn't state what the discount will be. How is that set?
I thought it was. Actually, no, we set that on an annual basis when we set the rates resolution. So you probably don't remember. We set the payment date and the penalty rate date, and we also set the amount of discount, which is, I think, currently 2%.
So that'll come back to us?
Yep, so at the end of this, hopefully our LTP cycle, when we adopt a long-term plan and then we pass a resolution to set the rates for the following year, you will therefore also set the discount. Yes, thank you.
Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, e te tiamana, and I apologise now, I'm just going to go back to the Treasury one, because I was trying to go through my Stella and it froze. So just going back to the part about the lending to CCOs. Hang on. Sorry, it's frozen again. Come on. Oh no, there we go. So yes, lending to council-controlled organisations. So I just wanted a bit more clarity around this part here. Where is it? Guarantees of financial indebtedness to CCTOs are prohibited, but financial support may be provided by subscribing for shares as called or uncalled capital. Can you just explain that a little bit more, please?
So that's around guarantees of debt. So
Yeah, I get that.
Council, as I've said before, we secure our debt against our revenues and rates. CCOs aren't actually able to do that because they don't rate themselves. So when they go to the banks, it has to be secured against something, or if the LGFA borrows to them. And Council can't actually provide a formal written guarantee to say, you go do what you need to do and we'll provide a guarantee to the bank on that debt. So how it's managed instead is through subscribed but uncalled capital. And so what it therefore says is that if a CCO wants to borrow $1 million from the bank, it will need $1 million worth of security. If it can't provide an asset or those sorts of forth, then Council can elect the CCO would issue $1 million worth of shares back to the Council, but Council wouldn't pay for those shares unless that debt got called upon. And so that's that mechanism of if a CCO couldn't pay its debt, it's got $1 million of subscribed but uncalled capital. It calls that capital back to its shareholder, which is the Council. Council would therefore pay for that $1 million, which goes to the CCO and the bank, and then the CCO would use that to pay the debt. So that's, again, a mechanism that's in place.
Thank you. That actually makes a lot of sense now. So thank you for that. Now going back to the rates of remission policies, all right? Come on. Okay, here we go. So the penalties for overdue metered water invoices. I thought that we had changed the way we do that. This, to my memory, this seems to be pretty much on par with what we've already got in place. Is that, am I right, or have I looked at something wrong?
Sorry, I don't have it quite in front of me. What specifically around that? So water by meter?
To enable council to act fairly and reasonable. Well, now that it's gone back to what we're paying the regional council, right? That was split out. That was the payment stuff, but we're still monitoring particular things. So I was reading the part here where it's significant family distribution, including death, illness, or accident of a family member, as at the due date. That was to do with payment, right? Mm-hmm. Was that always in there?
I think so. If you just showed, my apologies, that's the one policy I don't have in front of me. I know
it's a random one, but I don't quite recall the A and B actually.
For extraordinary or for water charges? Sorry.
Water charge, remissions of penalties and current overdue metered water invoices. Oh, it's not frozen anymore.
Oh, there. Yeah. Underneath, yeah. No, that's pretty consistent, I think, with the previous policy.
Okay, yeah, no, for some reason it just looked a bit different. So, no, keep quiet. I'll just move on. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Any further questions, Councillor Wayne?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, just following on from Councillor Waru's question around the metered water. My one's on a different one. The remission of metered water charges where a leak has been detected and repaired. So it says that the amount of the remission will be the difference between the average consumption of the property prior to the leak as deemed reasonable by council and the consumption over and above the average. So just clarifying, is that months before the previous year's metered, or what?
So, yeah, so what the team do is they compare the same period to the previous 12-month period. So obviously some businesses and entities have more water use obviously in summer than in winter, and so we would compare the same period to the one before, and then they would demonstrate that the repairs have been made, and we would provide them with a remission.
Okay, Councillor Lee. Did you have a question?
Didn't hear that. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thomas, the remission of rates for Queen Elizabeth II National Trust Open Space Covenants, what on earth is that about?
Sorry, I missed that last bit, Councillor.
Page 7.
Oh,
I know nothing about the Queen Elizabeth II National Trust Open Space Covenants.
Oh. It is where individual landowners elect to retire parts of their land, because it might be a significant natural area, it might be a bit of native bush or so forth, and they effectively elect to make it a QE Elizabeth II, and it has a covenant on it, so therefore that part of the property has to remain the way that it is, and so they get a rates remission for that. There is an anomaly, which we all know, which we talked about the policy with regards to the rates remission that QE2 does versus the SNAs. There is a difference in it, and that's because one, I think, is done through legislation, and obviously the other is done through councils setting the rates. I can't quite remember what the difference is, but it might be a factor of a couple of multiple times of what we currently have.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions, councillors, on the rates remission policy? No, there don't appear to be any. So we are now looking for a mover of the resolution that the council approve and draft a set of policies used to guide the development of the long-term plan 24 to 30, the revenue and financing policy, the treasury policy and the rates remission policy, and the council notes that these policies will be published in conjunction with the long-term plan consultation document following its adoption in March. It's been moved by Councillor Waru, seconded by Councillor Wang. Open for discussion. Councillor Waru is the mover.
Oh, I'll save mine for last, thank you.
Councillor Wang. General comments, councillors? Anyone else wishing to? No, Councillor Waru, you are the last.
Well, I'll be really quick. So, no, obviously I support this, and because I know it's going into the consultation document as well, which is required of us to do. So, you know, it's going to be put out there, and I'm sure we'll get some feedback on it. I just hope that we haven't missed an opportunity to be a bit more innovative with our policies, and maybe we'll get that feedback back. But other than that, ka pai, kia ora Thomas and your team, and all those involved, putting those together and running through them as you do, doing your mahi. So, kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Any further comments, councillors? No, there don't appear to be any. Thank you, Thomas, to you and your team for all the work that's gone into these documents, and that's a testament to the work that there don't appear to be many questions today. So, councillors, that's been moved and seconded. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Against Councillor Kiriopa, and that is carried. Thank you. Now moving on to 6.2 in the agenda, so page 16 of your agenda, but we're also, that is the document with the blue bar across the bottom in your Stella, in the middle of the second page of the Stella bookshelf. So that's the long-term plan supporting information part 3, the 30-year infrastructure strategy. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the report be received? Thank you, Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Barker. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. And welcome, Stavros, to overview the report.
Kia ora koutou. Good afternoon. The draft consultation document for the long-term plan contains two documents. You've got a large infrastructure strategy document, and you've got a summary document that is a report to you for this meeting today, which it does attempt to give a bit of succinct brief of what's contained in the infrastructure strategy. Now, the purpose of constructing an infrastructure strategy is to identify for elected members and the community clearly the issues that may affect the delivery of safe and reliable core services for those communities, and obviously to lead the debates embodied in the consultation related to the Council's financial strategy and related investment. From the professional perspective, we as chartered professional engineers every year also sign a code of ethics that requires us to report to our stakeholders, especially our governance boards, that the risks you see in managing the respective services and activities that are under our control, and also to propose a range of methods of managing those risks, cognizant of the community's and elected members' decisions about what's financially affordable for the community. Core infrastructure for many councils, or most of the councils, comprises the highest cost liability for council and the ratepayer. But also, we are well aware that its absence is catastrophic, for the community. For our own infrastructure, the assets that's under our control, the core infrastructure, the three waters and our transport, their replacement value is about $2 billion. On the factual side, legacy decisions made over the last 30 or 40 years have resulted into a large portion of that replaceable infrastructure not to be renewed, which is valued at around about $800 million, because about 25 to 57% of the number of assets we have exceeded their design life expectancy. Now, those risks also do not count the fact that we have constantly emerging and evolving new regulations and legislations for compliance factors that require sometimes asset replacement well in advance of their actual structural life, end of their life. An asset might be structurally sound, but is no longer fit for purpose because the regulations and the compliance requirements have changed over a period of time. Now, recognizing all those factors, the strategy notes 7 strategic issues that the community is facing in terms of infrastructure services, and proposes the approach to be taken in order to address this. Obviously, these are proposals and approaches that you as elected members in the community have to be cognizant of and agree to them. At the core of these approaches is the reality we believe that we are not strong enough financially to deal with all the legacy issues, and obviously we have finite limits of how much we can borrow, and obviously the community has finite limits in terms of their tolerance for rates increases. And therefore, the approaches we propose strive to achieve a balance between those constraints we have ahead of us and the risk management. So our overall direction is that we propose to use a combined activity and financial resources available within those constraints in a responsive manner that targets the highest priorities. And again, we define high priorities on the basis of identified consequences. We accept that because of our legacy issues, the affordability, our financial strength, and so on, a residual risk would continue to remain on all our services. The order of priorities are not always clearly anticipated when we work into long-term planning. For example, we cannot right now, in a meaningful and credit-worthy way, identify the priorities based on consequences that we'll face in about 6 or 7 years' time in the LTP. And therefore, we're making the best we can the infrastructure strategy on the basis of what we currently know to define these priorities, but also to recognize that there will be emerging and evolving circumstances that will require us to change those priorities. And that's the reality. And I note, and I'm sure most of you have noted too, in recent times, our sector, the insurance sector, the National Infrastructure Council, and certain media reports identified the effects of the Cyclone Gabriel that impacted the country last year in Auckland, Hawke's Bay, and Gisborne, and so on. And that impact is worth $13 billion. So, when you have events like that, it's got a severe and significant impact on your infrastructure, and obviously what you have identified as a consequences-based priority in previous years have to change drastically, and you need to have enough flexibility and adaptability to meet those evolving circumstances. Now, this overall approach, the fact that we do have some legacy issues, the fact that we do have a finite resources, both in terms of our ability to borrow more money and to leverage higher rates from the community, forms the foundation of our infrastructure strategy on trying to predict, the most appropriate level of consequences in basing our future interventions of those areas where failure carries the highest consequence. If I could summarize in short what the infrastructure strategy is, I think it's in those comments I've made today. Obviously, there are lots of information in the strategic document, and more than happy to take any questions you may have from that basis. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stavros, for overviewing the report. So, councillors, this is the 30-year infrastructure strategy. Councillor Patterson. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Stavros, for your report. Just looking at the infrastructure strategy, page 69, stormwater capital expenditure graph shows 2025-26 spending over 30 million, 2026-27 over 50 million. Can we get an explanation of what that is, please? What those projects are? Yeah, page 69.
I will reiterate one of the, and I think my colleague Jean-Paul and his team made to you a presentation earlier today about the future housing strategy, PC9, intensification, greenfield development, and so on. Now, we have talked about it in the past, and obviously one of the biggest constraints in terms of allowing those extra 6,000, 9,000, 10,000 houses to materialize is our ability to consent those new houses on the basis that the flooding risk arising from additional impermeable surfaces exceeds the flood risk model that the regulatory authority of the Bay of Plenty Regional Council will allow us to do that. Now, if you recall, we started a couple of years ago a significant master plan in looking into our flooding risk liabilities and vulnerabilities. We developed a master plan, and we're gradually working to improve our ability to respond to and manage both climate change and the projected and anticipated increases of housing we aspire to achieve. We have secured a number of external, a level of external funding from the government about that. We've got the IEF, the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund, $85 million. We've got the CAP that given to us in 2021, about $15 million. We had some funding from the Three Waters Reforms Funds, another $7 or $9 million, if I remember correct. And of course, we're adding some of our own growth investments. So all these numbers you see in the infrastructure strategy reflecting all this gross expenditure, but the net expenditure payable by the local ratepayer will be minus all this funding that comes from the government agencies. So we're working in the Western District, we're working in the Linden Park attenuation, we'll do more work, and a report is coming to you in the near future about the additional works in the Western and Central. We'll do more work on the Eastern side, but the combined investment of the next 5 to 10 years is significant in stormwater management because it's necessary to allow your housing strategies to be achieved.
Thank you for that. And that I guess that's what's referred to further on funded by government eastern and western projects totalling 104 million for the first 5 years. That's the same information, isn't it? So you touched on the title, the Stormwater Master Plan. Have we seen that?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through the Chair, Stavros, your 30-year infrastructure strategy document 3.2.1, Mana Whenua, the partnership with Mana Whenua is embedded in the way RLC works. Is that a reference to the protocol committees, for example?
No, Councillor Lee, the protocol committees is a relationship management that you as elected members as a council decide to maintain with various with Mana Whenua groups. At the hard core of infrastructure logic is that we are relying, we have infrastructure that's either is located or passing by or has easements through various lands that control with Mana Whenua. And therefore, in order to enable that community benefit of achieving community infrastructure, we need to maintain in a reciprocatory way goods and constructive relationship with Mana Whenua who own that land. Otherwise, we cannot go and every 5 minutes use the Public Works Act to impose our will onto landowners. Managing the relationship is a significant risk mitigation for us who own and operating public infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
No further questions, councillors? Councillor Waru.
Kia ora, te tiamana, kia ora Stavros. Thank you for your kōrero. Just quickly, as I read through this, there were a lot of elements of the FDS plan and the even PC9 kaupapa. How closely aligned have you, is this plan or this strategy to those plans that we've just spoke about this morning?
Thank you, Councillor Waru. I think in the broader sense, the vast majority of our investment in infrastructure is related to operating, maintaining, repairing existing infrastructure. We also dedicate about, in the current levels and evaluations of assets, just a little bit over 1% of the value, replacement value of our assets into renewals. And then we've got growth elements, into the whole process. So, and that's clearly identified the stormwater master plan that Councillor Patterson was talking about, the upgrade of our treatment plant, the upgrade of our rising mains to lead wastewater into a treatment plant, the upgrade and reinforcement of our water supplies, storage tanks and so on, are taken into clear consideration what our future development strategy anticipates to be a housing development over the next 30 years, calculates where they're going to be, calculates the demand they will generate, and then we do a modeling work to say, okay, how much water you need there, how much wastewater it will generate, where it's going to go, how it's going to be traveled to your treatment processes, how much additional impermeable surfaces we generated, how much surface runoff, and what we need to attenuate and manage it in a safe way. So the infrastructure strategy, to our best of our ability at this point in time, as best as we can model and predict that, is founded clearly on our future development strategy, PC9 and other MDRAs, in order to accommodate that growth. Is it 100% accurate? Well, I would be probably not very credit-worthy if I said, yeah, I can't predict what's going to happen in 10 years, or 15 or 20 years' time. But the best of our ability, we predict it and embed it into our infrastructure strategy.
Thank you, Stavros, and I just want to commend you on identifying relationships with Mana Whenua and iwi and so on and so forth as important in terms of moving this kaupapa forward. Kia ora.
Thank you, councillors. I think that looks like that's the end of the questions in relation to that. So thank you very much, Stavros, to you and your team for that comprehensive work that you've done there. So can I ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the Council approve the draft 30-year infrastructure strategy 2024 to 2054 for inclusion in the 2024 long-term plan consultation process? It's moved by Councillor Barker and it has been seconded by Councillor Wang. We're now open for discussion. Councillor Barker, as Chair of the Infrastructure and Environment Committee, would you like to lead off the discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to Stavros and his team for all the work on this comprehensive program. I've identified the significant issues that are going to be facing us over the next 10 years and highlighted some key areas that we need to address, and also highlighted the costs that are involved and also some of the legacy issues that we've inherited because of decisions made in the past over the years. It's good to note that we've got a plan here in front of us that addresses the affordability to our community while balancing out all the other things. It takes a balanced approach to looking after our infrastructure to make sure it's stable and resilient and safe, so that we don't have any accidents that we, or as little as possible. It also needs to be able to meet the future demand, and that's hard to predict, but also it needs to be in line with all the other pieces of policy work that we've just been working on as a council as well, the FDS, the PC9, and also the funding that we've applied for from the government, the IAF, and those kinds of bits of funding as well. The challenging part is taking into consideration the legislative changes that are coming our way as well, and you'll notice that the Three Waters has been left as it is. It also is important that this piece of work has taken into consideration cultural impacts and views and values, and also the effects of the variable weather that we are experiencing. All these things have been taken into account in its entirety. I'd just like to say that it's put in place clear measures to maximise the useful lives of our infrastructure as much as possible, addresses the key issues, and gives us a plan forward for the future. And so I fully support this plan. Thank you, this strategy. Thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor Barker, for those comments. Councillor Wang is the seconder. Do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just supporting our Chair Barker's comments there, and just to thank Stavros and his team for the extensive amount of work that's gone into this strategy. It's the first thing that we need to do, is to have that strategy in place. So like Councillor Barker said, that we can not, it's hard to predict what the future will hold, but I believe that this is the best piece of work that we have that can do its best to do that, to manage the growth of our district in terms of infrastructure, and also the renewals, the focus on the renewals as well, as we've seen is quite a topical issue around the country right now. So thanks for that.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would just like to echo Councillor Barker's excellent synopsis of the program. I fully support it and endorse it. Again, though, Madam Chair, I'd just like to say, and I know it's probably outside the venue of this particular report, but again, I just have concerns that, again, as a council, we're missing the big picture here. And the big picture for me is, how do we communicate to the community the price of water? So the value of water we all know, but the water itself and the infrastructure required about it, how do we communicate that to the community? We need to explain to them in full terms, which I don't think we've ever quite realistically done successfully before, to say that water costs a hell of a lot of money now, it'll cost a hell of a lot more tomorrow, and it'll cost a damn side more in the future. And that's just part, there's nothing really anyone can do about that. But how do we communicate that? And the second part is, I appreciate we've been waiting for legislative changes and with the change of government. The other side is, how do we move forward? Now, I don't claim to have any magic suggestions or be brighter than anyone else at this table. It's pretty obvious, but anyway. How do you communicate? If you look at, say, Auckland and the very serious issues they've had around a single water entity, it hasn't been solved. Despite record rainfall, they've had drought conditions. And if you look at the sideshow down in Wellington, where there's a pool of various councils into a corporate entity, that doesn't appear at the moment to be working even much better. Now, I don't claim to have a solution right here today, but I think it's imperative for this council and its leadership to start those discussions as soon as possible. Ideally, I would have preferred in the LTP to start putting those options and conversations started with the community to say, how do we recognise that? How do we recognise the steps forward, the options, and how do we value water? Do we put drinking water in the same vein as water for, you know, your garden? I appreciate gardens, and especially with local food crops, you know, for older people like Councillor Brown or Councillor Lee, those options are very important. But how do you value water just for your grass as opposed to drinking water? How do you encourage conservation on something which we've all become accustomed to just turning on the tap whenever we feel like it? Those are very big questions, and they're outside a little bit to some scope. But when you look at the responsibilities we have as councillors that are listed here, I think the sooner we can start on these conversations, again, may not be solutions in this term, but we need to start having those conversations with the community as soon as possible. Again, I thank the team for their excellent report, and I fully endorse it, but I do hope that we take some of these forward solutions seriously about bringing that into the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien, and remembering that this is a document that we're going out to be discussing with the community, so there is that opportunity for us to start having those discussions with the community during that consultation phase as well. So these discussions are ongoing, and as you say, we don't have all the answers here today, but this is the start by having good planning, good strategy. It's also another piece in the puzzle in terms of looking at the growth provisions for the future. And so take on board that it's hard to start that discussion about the value of water, but I think that where it says in the paper that this is all about providing core and lifeline services, so I think that water is definitely one of those. So I'm sure that the community will engage in that discussion. So Councillor Lee, followed by Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You may wish to consider bringing the microphone a little closer. I think you may be a little far away, but... You can't hear me? Yeah. Okay, I'm right here. Okay, thank you. Again, I'd like to thank Stavros and his team for a comprehensive report. As will have been obvious over the last few meetings, I do have some concerns about the legalities of some of our the protocol committees and how they operate, and rights of veto that appear to be evident, and decision-making powers and so forth. I'm not going to relitigate that. I'm simply going to let everybody know that to that end of pursuing those questions, I have laid a complaint with the Ombudsman, the second complaint now in 2 months, to address those issues. So I will be interested to see whether the Ombudsman considers secret meetings to be acceptable, unelected people making decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. We are actually talking about the infrastructure strategy.
That was a good quarter about water.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My concerns lie with what I initially was unhappy about with the FDS, and the same with Plan Change 9, that we seem to be putting growth above everything else. All other aspects of our community are basically ignored. For the golden goose of growth in Rotorua, is that really the way we should be going? How about thinking about the well-being of the people who already live here and have done for generations? So once again, I will register my protest vote, and I will not be supporting this.
I tautoko the comments made by Councillor Patterson, and I also will not be supporting for the same reasons. Thank you.
I just want, I don't know whether the batteries are going a little bit flat, so maybe we just need to speak a little bit louder or bring the microphones a little bit closer. So any further comments, Councillor Brown?
We'll be supporting this. Growth comes off the back of central government, partly central government allowing 120,000 people into the country. We've got to build, and I've said this before, a new city the size of Dunedin every year. So we're going to get growth whether we like it or not. The question is whether we're going to plan for it appropriately and put the infrastructure and housing, etc., in place for these people. If we don't, what happens is the price of housing goes up, we have system failures, and cities become unlivable. So we have to plan for the growth, whether we like it or not. But I do take on board that your comments, Councillor Patterson's comments about looking after the people that are here. We invest a lot of money into parks and reserves and lakefronts and forests and the like. So I think the well-being of the city as well, the well-being of the residents is well considered. So I will be supporting it, and I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Waru.
Yeah, no word to say. I'm going to quickly, because a lot of the things I was going to say have been said. That being said, this is a draft. You've mentioned that, Madam Chair, and it's out for feedback. And I think the wero on us is to get out there and make sure our people in the community understand what it is. That's what it's about. We've got to get them to be more proactive and getting together and actually being part of the process. No use leaving it for when it's all done and then ka puta mai e nei kōrero. So, I just want to encourage the community to get into it when it does come out for consultation. I will be supporting it. The other thing too is, we're talking about infrastructure and growth and all those kind of things. That doesn't mean we can't get out there and make sure that the things like are important to particular people on this council, i.e. the environment and things like that. That doesn't stop that conversation. I certainly don't think it does. Relationships and all those kind of things, all important to moving forward. There was mention of a kōrero that there's been a thing put forward to the Ombudsman. I'm disappointed in that kōrero, however, it is what it is, and we'll move forward, and I hope we can put it to bed. So, because personally, koe wa hohau I ne kōrero coming up every hui. And so I'll leave it at that. I support the kaupapa, and I look forward to the feedback from iwi, from the community. Katoa, o Rotorua, kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. For my part, I also support the strategy. I would ask councillors not to be short-sighted in voting no to the strategy. This is a 30-year strategy, so we need to provide for both future generations, predicted growth, and we're also ensuring reliability of our core services now for our citizens. That's quite key to this strategy. So we are making sure that we're looking after as best we can the services that we can provide today. So I think that it is short-sighted for councillors to vote no on the basis that you don't like growth, but this is not that discussion that we're having today. This discussion is about a strategy to ensure that we have got things in place to look after our infrastructure both now and in the future for the next 30 years. And we've also had that discussion previously based on Councillor O'Brien's discussion about how water is a core lifeline service, and that means that we need to look after the infrastructure now and in the future. And so I will be supporting the strategy. So I think that only leaves Councillor Barker as the... oh, sorry. Your Worship, you seem to have dropped off on my screen, so I'm not sure if...
No problem. And thank you very much, Madam Chair, through you. I raised my hand earlier, but then I thought the councillors covered it off pretty well. But I do want to just leave some final remarks. One of the things that hasn't been mentioned today is the fact that the infrastructure strategy is also about resilience of critical infrastructure for our community, as well as managing the risk. So, as many have said, this is core services to our community, but it's also mentioned in the infrastructure strategy, simple things like ensuring access to the lakes. Now we know with the intense rainfalls that we're experiencing, the climate change, the very high lake levels, we need to continue to manage the risk and resilience of our critical infrastructure. So I'm very proud that drinking water wise, we consistently pass drinking water standards. But that sort of excellency doesn't come without the plan and without ensuring that we're investing in the assets. We will not be like other councils who continue to sweat the assets and make poor decisions, and the best way to make the best decision is to plan for it and to ensure that we're adequately addressing the risk to the community. So I'm very happy to be supporting this. I acknowledge the work that goes into a 30-year infrastructure strategy, and I also look forward to any feedback that we get from the community. Thank you.
Kia ora, Mayor Tapsell. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I tautoko a lot that what has been said by hopefully the majority, and that is supporting this 30-year strategy. I can recall when the election was held last year, or whenever it was, in October, and we had our first of many workshops. And boy, there was a lot of good positive kōrero about growth and making sure we lift ourselves out of COVID and out of various areas. So this certainly, definitely is one way of doing that. And to also to support what Councillor Wadu said, if we don't have good relationships with our iwi in our community, the job will be harder. And it used to be harder. But because we have built up a good relationship with our iwi, there's cooperation. So I just want to indicate that I strongly support the 30-year strategy, and thanks to the staff. Kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. Councillor Barker, as the mover, do you wish to have your right of reply?
I don't think that's really necessary. Thank you, Madam Chair. There's been some really great discussion around the table, and I take on board all that's been said today, and just reiterate my thanks to Stavros and his team for all the work that's been done. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now have a motion on the table. It's been moved and seconded. I'll now put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. That is carried. Now moving on, councillors, to page 23 of the agenda. So that is the part 4 of the supporting information, the draft financial strategy. So can I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report? Moved Councillor Waru, seconded Councillor Brown. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you. Carried. Back to you, Thomas, again to overview this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The financial strategy, I guess, outlines, summarises the decisions that you've made in preparing the draft long-term plan, and outlines the financial implications and measures and actions that you've taken. I guess I'll just remind the councillors and anyone listening as well, is that I think sometimes we forget quickly the past, and for us the past was an environment of COVID and uncertainty, an incredibly high inflationary period over a period of 18 months. In 2022, in our annual report, we had a $25 million asset valuation gain, and in 2023 we had $50 million. They're quite substantial asset value changes, and many of the councils around the country are now grappling with the challenges of, as those assets have increased, looking after them becomes more expensive, and the flow and effect of that. Climate resilience, we've talked a number of times, obviously, of particularly the weather events that hit predominantly the North Island this time last year, with those 3 cyclones coming through, and also the cost of living crisis. And so for me, I guess, to summarise the financial strategy, it would be one of balance. It would be one of balance of delivery of services and looking after our assets and balancing that against affordability. And so with that, happy to answer any questions that you may have. There is a couple of graphs in the prudence section of the agenda, which I would like to have a bit of a kōrero about, but happy to have any questions if someone already has some on those aspects.
Thank you, Thomas. How do you want to take questions then around the other documents, or are you just happy to take questions as they arise?
Just happy as they arise, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillors then. So I'll just perhaps just give everyone a bit of a moment because they're all in separate, they've been uploaded as separate folders. Documents, sorry. Councillor Brown, do you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, I do. The financial prudence benchmarks, it's the paper with all of the black graphs. The final two graphs in that document talk about benchmark not met under essential services and debt servicing. Could someone explain that to us, how we're not meeting the benchmark?
Yep, those are the two I was referring to before, without signalling them out. So just to put a bit of context around, I guess, the information that we're asking you to do is obviously the financial strategy. There's a set of financial statements. There's a set of prudence graphs. Now, some of them are used in our financial strategy and others are not. Now, the financial prudence measures are set, I guess, by the DIA, and they were created 9+ years ago, might have been even 12 from memory. And what they're designed to do is to make sure that our councils, when they were going out with their long-term plans and annual plans, but also reporting in the annual reports, we're providing a standardised format to present certain aspects of information. And so two of those, as you've seen, is one is essential services and one is the debt servicing benchmark. Now, the essential services measure is one that measures you have a level of depreciation, and what that means is that your assets are declining in value and therefore are eroding over a period of time. And the measure should be, like everything, is that if your asset is eroding and declining, you should be matching that with at least an element of renewal to retain it at that 100% level. And so that's what this measure does. And so in the very first 7 years of the long-term plan, we are investing more into our assets and our infrastructure than it is declining. In those future years 8, 9 and 10, we're actually just below the measure. And the reason for that is actually tied predominantly to the wastewater activity. We'll be aware that we have an agreement or a contract with Trinity, and within that there is a baseline of renewals that has been agreed and is funded. And at the end of that 2031 period is when that contract expires. We've extrapolated out that trajectory of the renewals. And what's happening is that the value of that asset is increasing at a higher rate than what the level of renewal has been taking place. And so what's very likely to take place in year 7 of the LTP, as we look at that service, the amount of renewals, it will likely have to spend more in renewals than what we're signalling in our LTP, is a potential outcome. So that's the first one. The second one is the debt servicing benchmark, and this is a reflection of the level of debt that Council has and how it is repricing into the future. And so while we do talk about ourselves being a high or moderate growth council, we're not technically meet the requirements of formally being a high growth council, such as Tauranga City, Auckland, Queenstown. And so their benchmark allows their interest expense as a percentage of revenue to be up to 15%, but because we're a medium growth council, ours caps out at 10%. And what this measure shows is that we've talked about that conservative nature in our debt cost forecast into the future of the LTP because of the uncertainty we have, and it's repricing to about 5.5%, 6%. What's that signalling is that as more of our existing debt therefore reprices off that much lower rate that we currently have, we move above that measure. And so the only way to actually fix that is to either generate more revenues, pay down debt, or and it's a mix of, what may also happen is that forecast cost of debt will likely be lower than what we're signalling here as well. But there's also the risk and the likelihood that it could go higher. And so we're signalling that's the challenge there. So if I come back to the essential services benchmark as well, one of the challenge is when, after those workshops, and we talked about the level of depreciation we'd funded, and many of them pointed out the predominantly tied to that. I guess when we talk about balancing services and affordability and the level of debt, us exceeding that benchmark around debt servicing for years 5 to 10 could be a topic with regards to the consultation.
Thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just looking at the draft list of capital projects, attachment 3, it's quite clear here, stormwater master plan projects IAF funded, that's made quite clear. But then when you have a look at the museum project, it doesn't say that this money is being co-funded by anybody. Should we make that clear so it doesn't look like that's all on us?
It is pretty clear elsewhere. So in our significant forecasting assumptions, we list the subsidies. I guess the purpose of this report is not to show the level of funding. It is just to show the
actual expenditure.
Actual expenditure.
So when I added that up, those 3 years only come to 61.6 million. Where's the other 20 million? Have we already spent that?
We're already progressing, and obviously we're in a current year where we're doing a significant amount of feasibility work. Yep.
Right. And then the museum exhibition is listed in there, 2.2, 3.2 and 2.7 out to 2027. Has that already been settled as in what the formula or form that exhibition will take, or is this just a projection?
So just coming back, also this capital works program is uninflated, so that's a bit of the difference that you described as well. The team are doing work and working with community groups with regards to designing the exhibition. I think shortly, hopefully within the next month, you'll have a paper to council with regards to a decision or to proceed or not with the museum project, and part of that we can give you an update with regards to how that exhibition is progressing and looking, and the funding needs to support it as well. Yep. Right,
thank you. And just one more point of clarification on that. The Energy Event Centre renewals at 2.7, 2.4, 1.5, 1.5 out to 2028. Is that to do with the removal of the facade that's rusty, or what's that for?
So the fins are gone, if you've noticed, and I must say it actually looks better, I think, without the fins, but my apologies to the architect if they're listening. The big portion of those renewals is actually internals as well with regards to the amenities within the facility. We've obviously done the roof, and there are some cladding issues that also need to be resolved. So they're all, yes, predominantly targeting either the services or the exterior or the amenities inside the building, yes.
Okay, thank you.
looking around, I don't see any hands, so it looks like we've run out of questions in relation to the draft financial strategy. So I do just want a minute just to double check, because there were the individual attachments for those, but they're much shorter documents. Okay, there doesn't appear to be any further questions. So can I have a mover and a seconder that the council approve the long-term plan 2024 to 34 draft financial strategy? Moved Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Wang. Open for discussion, Councillor Brown.
For me, I think this is as good as you're going to get, given the complexity of what we're going to have to deal with in the future. So I think the team's done a very good job. I don't necessarily agree with all the assumptions, but time will unfold and we will see what we get. So I think the balance is right, and this is an appropriate document to consult with.
Thank
so
you,
I support it. Thank you.
Brown. Councillor Wang.
Support the comment. Thank you, Madam Chair. Support the comments made by Councillor Brown, and thank Thomas and again his team for putting this all together and all the work that's gone into this. I think with this topic and the other decisions that we've just made beforehand, it's very important to remember that all of this is included into the draft LTP to go out for consultation. So we're not actually making the final decision on any of the decisions that we had just made over the last few rounds. It's to go out to the community to help them understand the situation that we're in and where we're hoping to be, and also getting that feedback so that we can make an informed decision. So I hope that is where we do go. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wang. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now, at the risk of betraying my nickname, Dr. No, I would just like to say for the years 7 to 10, we're looking at rates rises 3.16, 2.62, 1.94, 2.41. I'm not sure how much faith we can put in those, because again, as no one can predict the future. But can I just say, and I better check my own forehead here to make sure I'm not sick, I'd be comfortable down the track if the feedback was for us to look to increase those slightly. I don't know how many members of the public actually believe us to be putting in rates rises of 2%. Also too, given the constraints of the COVID and inflation years, I'd be actually quite comfortable to say to the community that that needs to be closer to 4%. We're going to have onwards issues with assets, and again, it's about, as Councillor Brown said in December, you know, I didn't come here either to kick the can down the road. We need to address some of the issues and problems that we have. So for me, I'm happy for this to go out as a draft, but should the community feel that those final years, perhaps the evaluations could be slightly higher, I'd certainly have no objection to that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Councillor Waru.
Tēnā koe, te te amana o tira tātou katoa. Yes, obviously, yes, I'll be speaking in support of this kaupapa. It's, I'm with Councillor Brown on a few of the assumptions. I thought we were a bit thing, but hey, you know, that's Thomas's team, and those are the numbers he's come up with, and they are the experts in this field. So I guess remembering this is going out again with the consultation pack, and those who want to comment around these things can. And I did want to mention something that I was going to mention in the last kōrero, but it applies the same here. You know, we're doing all this mahi because many, you know, years gone by, other councils have failed to make the upgrades and make the hard decisions. Not talking about individuals, but those are just how things rolled out in those times. We are here now with all these, you know, infrastructure issues, finance issues and stuff that we've got to deal with now. So then we don't leave them for our tamariki mokopuna to have to deal with in 20, 30 years. So I think, you know, I just want to encourage them, you know, got to be a bit bold here and a bit brave, and push a few things here, because in the end of the day, as you're seeing all over the country with all the different councils that, again, didn't want to make the hard calls at the time, Now everybody in the country is paying for it and looking for some pūtea to help them out. So I will be supporting this, as I said, and I look forward to seeing the pack. Ngā mihi.
Thank you, Councillor Waru. Are there any councillors that wish to speak against the motion? Otherwise, I'm going to put the motion now. I think we've had a good discussion this afternoon. No, it doesn't appear to be. So it's been moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Wang. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Thank you, that is carried. That, councillors, brings in close to today's council meeting. So, Councillor Kiriopa, could you close our meeting with the karakia, please?
Certainly. Kia whakairia te tapu, kia wātea ai te ara, kia tūruki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakataha ai, haumi e, hui e, tāra ki e.
Tēnā koe, Councillor Kiriopa, no I taki karakia mā tātou. That, councillors, brings the meeting to a close, so thank you very much for your participation today. It has been a long day, so I declare the meeting closed.